Well, hello there. This is another one of those videos where I'm just, playing around with some game mechanics, doing a little bit of solo playtesting. And I'm playing around with these little ships. I got them from LaserCast Studio. I painted them up in a video you can probably see elsewhere on my YouTube page. But yeah, there's lots of games for little trireme ships, little historical boat miniatures. But I find that a lot of them end up being just park your boat next to the other boat and roll dice to see who won. And that's okay. That's a fun game potentially. I feel it captures a real sense of Roman boarding actions, that kind of thing. But I kind of wanted to see if I could figure out a game where you get more of a Greek trireme style, where you're trying to deliberately collide with one another, and just that chaos of this naval combat period where it all could just fall apart real quick. Anyway, so that's the idea behind this game and what I'm trying to capture in it. So basically you've got your little ships, and what you do is you have playing cards that represent what your fleet is capable to do, what your rowers are able to do. You play a card next to each ship that says whether it can turn left or turn right or go straight ahead or pivot on one spot. And that determines where your ship goes. You draw up your little hand of cards. You've got to choose what cards you have in your hand to play. And that's kind of like your little rowers on the ship. One bank of rowers getting more tired than the other bank of rowers. So you have to sort of make the best choices that you can with the cards you have. In addition, you're trying to line yourself up and collide into other groups. And that's going to be really tricky with these little tiny boats. As you can see, they're not very long. The idea is one of these things is 1 to 900 something scale. But yeah, trying to line that up with cards could be tricky, could be fiddly. So I make use of these little strips. These little strips here sort of show where they're going to travel over the course of a turn. And basically you just need to intersect the strip, not necessarily line up and hit the small ship. Also, where you intersect on that ship determines how much damage you inflict on the vessel. Anyway, that's the quick spark notes on it. I've put together a document, and I've actually played a similar game to this with some of my cousins. So this is just more of a video of me trying out some updated rules that we found would make the game work a bit better. I'm not going to use our capital ships in this game. I'm just going to use our light ships and our heavy ships. They're just going to go crashing into each other. And yeah, so let's tune in. We've got ourselves the Athenian fleet over here with the black sterns. We've got the Lacedaemonian fleet over here with their red sterns. Not really creating any particular battle. Just having these two sides crash into each other around our little island. So, without much further ado, let's get set up and let's get playing. So as you can see, the Athenian forces find themselves in the bay of Chelona Island. Meanwhile, over to the west, we have the Lacedaemonian force. They're, in theory, coming on patrol, and the Athenian forces are waiting to ambush them. At this point, both fleets draft up 5 cards and then choose 3 to play, 1 for each ship. And then when we flip them over, the card's value determines the order of play for each ship. Then comes the measuring. They measure out where the ships will go in that phase, unless they're interrupted by being rammed or if they get hit by long-range volley fire. And once we've determined where they are going, we then move on to the next stage, which is, of course, movement, which is more or less just a formalization of the decisions made in this phase. Then moving to their appropriate position as dictated during that second phase. As you can see, the Athenian force is making out to the south, all moving as one cohesive body, trying to stay together to inflict pain all at once. Meanwhile, the Lacedaemonians are splitting up, with the 2 light ships heading down to the south and the heavier vessel coming around to see if maybe they can pincer movement this thing. With the fleets moving with their respective strategies, the second round begins. New cards are drafted up and they are flipped again to determine turn order. This time it seemed to be that the Lacedaemonians managed to get, on the whole, a slightly higher set of cards.
Meanwhile, the Athenians themselves would be largely just trying to pivot on the spot in order to get around and try and get at the light ships coming in from the south. Round 3, and a new set of cards are dealt, and this round would see some a combat. The Athenian forces would make first contact with one light ship ramming into another right at the end of their movement, which means they would be able to inflict maximum damage when they intercepted. There was almost a second clash, however both light vessels just pulled up short from crashing into one another. In the next round, we would see who would manage to budge first to get those points. When vessels ram one another, they will always score a consistent number of damage points to the other vessel, dependent on how far they had travelled in order to make that conflict. In this case, this light vessel would be seriously injured from 3 points down to just 1. And with that, the Lacedaemonians' strategy to divide and conquer seemed to be failing. In the next round, with two light ships facing head-to-head, it was actually the Athenian who managed to move in first and inflict its damage on the opponent first. However, the Lacedaemonian ship also used a face card which represents conflict, as did the previous ramming vessels from the previous round. So in the end, combat is decided with a dice roll. You're looking to try and double the opponent's score to inflict damage, but relatively low amount of damage compared to what you can do when you ram another vessel. The Lacedaemonians, unsurprisingly, managed to prove that they were the best fighters when it came to hand-to-hand combat. Again, luck of the dice in this case, but it seemed fitting. And with that, the Lacedaemonians were able to almost level the score. In addition to that, there was an Athenian vessel that seemed to be lingering off to the side, proven to be fairly useless. Would it be able to engage before the heavy Lacedaemonian ship managed to move in and do some serious damage? A second round of close quarters combat from our two light vessels, and as both cards attacked, there was no advantage for being the aggressor in this combat. This time though, the Atticans managed to do their business. Both fleets, becoming tired, were seeing that their options were becoming limited, with increasingly right turns becoming favoured in this match. It meant that some vessels would manage to skid past each other as they sailed. So that's the thing, you got to make sure that you manage your hand, that you still have options later on. But obviously, rams still occurred. We had here a Lacedaemonian manage to crash themselves into an Athenian vessel, but not before a different Lacedaemonian vessel would crash into the other first, meaning that entire movement by that first vessel, the Athenian vessel, would be cancelled out by the first vessel's ramming. Slightly complicated, but basically it copped a bigger hit in the end. At this stage, the Athenian force was flagging, with the Lacedaemonians possibly overplaying their hand. A few vessels that were quite hurting, getting themselves right into the action. Combat would be joined between these two colliding vessels. In the end, it wouldn't be an outright victory for the Athenians. It would move the fighting into the next round, but the Athenians would get the advantage of an additional dice. It would get a little confusing right on the edge of the map. There were about to be two crashes, the red into the Athenians and the Athenian into the red, if it wasn't for some long-range volley fire forcing the Athenian vessel to go off its intended course and almost straight off the board itself. Meanwhile, the close combat fighting between the two vessels would continue, and unsurprisingly, the Athenians won. This would send the first Lacedaemonian vessel to the bottom. And just like that, the fortune of Ares seemed to drastically swing in the favor of the Athenians, with a tight fight happening on the edge of the map and a heavy vessel now available to come in and assist. Convenient starboard card, the Athenians would manage to gang up and really dogpile in on the heavy Lacedaemonian ship. Meanwhile, the light vessel, unable to quite get the angle right, would basically be just leaving the field rather than aiding in the fight. The pain was only just beginning for the heavy Lacedaemonian vessel. With a face card being played, combat would begin, and again the Athenians' luck would go their way. They would inflict even more damage upon them, reducing the heavy vessel down to just above half its overall hit points. At this stage, both sets of rowers were beginning to reach the end of their limits. The game would be over soon, and it would end slightly anticlimactically, with both vessels unable to angle to make any last blows, sailing off into the distance, with only one face card, one last possible combat to see any movement, any change, which it didn't in the end. So with that, all of the rowers are spent in their combat. The playboards would see one burning hulk and the others ships fleeing in all directions. Look, in the story, the Athenians have managed to maintain this part of the ocean, holding their island, sending the Lacedaemonians fleeing with their tail between their legs.
Cool, well, there you go. So in the end, I guess unsurprisingly, the Athenians won, although mechanically so far I haven't really set up slightly different rules for the Athenians versus the Lacedaemonians. But anyway, maybe it was just fate. They won 6-4 at the end there. And yeah, learned lots during that playthrough. Just things around play order. Like I said, the cards, the value of the card determines what ship goes when, which was an idea that we came up with when we were playing, like I said, with my cousins previously. And in many respects, I do think that drafting and card choice really does add to the game. It makes or breaks it, basically. And you didn't quite see that in the video because you see more like the outcomes of the orders given. But that initial orders phase is where the strategy and the mind games set in, which is what you want in a good war game. But also, just then playing, interesting to see how, with that turn order, does that turn order then mean which ship rams which? Like normally it's just basically whoever comes later will then intercept a previous ship. But as you could see at occasions, there were occasions where one ship would basically get a head start on another and ram and thus negate the card that they had played, if that makes sense. Anyway, basically fiddly things that need to be sort of explained if I was ever to try and explain this game to people who are actually playing it. On that topic, yeah, I'm sort of playing around with these rules. Maybe one day if I can get it all sorted out and make it look pretty, put it on something like wargamevault.com. But look, maybe not. Regardless, it was fun. And yeah, hopefully it's just a different way of playing with these little trireme ships. So yes, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you'll see me again in the future. Goodbye.